Well, here we are once again, folks, and it's a beautiful Thursday afternoon here in downtown Pahrump, Nevada. And I give you the day as Thursday because this show does replay during the week at the same time, 5 o'clock. So if you missed something today or you were listening and had to go to a personal necessity, whatever that is, you can always tune back in another day and hear what's going on. Well, this is April. You know, April 1st, April Fool's Day. There was a time in California when I lived there that a close personal friend called me up in the morning, and I forgot it was April 1st. And he called me up and said that he had gone down to my office that morning and the office door was unlocked. Well, this was a real estate office, and that could be serious business. A lot of stuff could be missing. So I got dressed real quick. I didn't brush my teeth. I didn't comb my eye. I just ran out the door, drove over to the office, and it was locked. I called him up and I said, "Are you sure you went to the right office?" And he said, "April Fool." Yes, and that was one of my best friends. So I did get him another day, though. So, turnabout's fair play. Anyway, this is April. April is the beginning of the time of year when normally you might expect a little wind, but man, we've been getting wind every day for the last 2 weeks. And even when I think the wind is over, here comes another blow. I don't know what that's all about. But believe it or not, there's actually 5 seasons in the desert, especially here in Peru. There's summer, fall, winter, and spring. And in between winter and winter and spring, there's another season. We call it the weed season. When I left sunny California, I thought no more lawn, no more mowing, everything's going to be great. The bottom line was, I didn't know there were weeds here. And that, when you drive through Pahrump, at certain times of the year, there's virtually no weeds because they've all dried up. But boy, when they come in a vengeance. And my habit is to take a flat-bladed shovel and just cut underneath them. Well, eventually I keep that up, and then I don't get any more weeds the rest of the year until next year's weed season. So a lot of people like to go out and buy chemicals that kill the weeds, but I just don't like doing that because I think overall there are side effects to everything. And nature does not normally provide weed killer. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are some plants in the desert. Let's take creosote, for instance. You put creosote on your posts when you put them in the ground to keep the bugs from eating the wood. But that comes from the creosote plant. And if you see creosote plants, they actually put out, I think it's a salt, that prevents other seeds from germinating within a certain distance of the plant. It's really interesting how plants work. And later on in the show, we're going to talk a little about the gardening issue in Nevada, especially here in Pahrump in the desert. But I want to get into some other things first. There's been a lot of talk these days about equity. Now, to me, equity means the fact that we should all get a fair share. Now, or maybe we should all be treated fairly. But equity and fairly are not the same thing. And what you see happening to you today, let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to the 50s, or maybe even before that. Living has its ups and downs. Some days things are great, and other days they're not. And I've always adopted a philosophy that if it's not good today, I shouldn't stress over it so much because tomorrow can be better. It all depends on what I do. And therein lies the issue of equity. You cannot give something to somebody to make them better unless you give them something that helps them become better themselves. Now, if that's ever happened to you and you have something in your life that you'd like to share with the audience today, you can call in here, and right now the line is open. It's I'll give you the phone number. It's 775-990-4900. So during everyone's life, not everything is always a bed of roses. Sometimes bad things happen to good people, and sometimes good things happen to bad people. I mean, you can just kind of play that game all day long. These days, the game of politics that's what they're doing. They're telling you everybody's suffering. Now we have to have the issue of equity. First it was fairness, then it was everybody has to have more money in their pockets. It just went on and on. Frankly, I'm a little tired of all this political correctness. I'm tired of people who own large companies telling me what I can and can't say. Because the people who want them to do that to us shop at their stores, and they threaten to shut their stores down. That's not a good reason to tell us, or me, or anyone else, what they can say. And if you look at what's going on in the world today, we're all being told what we can and cannot say. The issue of equity, I can tell you where they can put that. But you already know, I don't even have to say it. Why don't people who are running our government just do what we asked them to do, which was keep us safe, free from harm, and earn your time in government, and then leave and let someone else go in and take a turn. Instead, we've got these career politicians who pander to every nook and cranny of this country to keep themselves in office. Look at, now that they just gave away $2 trillion. There's another $3 trillion that they want to put into play. That's $5 trillion. Can you even put your head around $5 trillion? Hell, I have a problem with $1 million. And you know, there are people in government today that their overall income annually in Nevada, you can go on Transparent Nevada and you can look at it. Some people are making $1.3 million a year working for the government. Think about that. And it's not just one person. As a matter of fact, I was looking at Transparent Nevada's website, and I decided I wanted to see who made $250,000 a year. When I got to the 4th page of names, I gave up. So every 4 years, they've earned $1 million. Run the numbers. In 10 years, each of those individuals will have had an income total of $10 million. And that doesn't include the stuff they got under the table. And don't tell me they don't get stuff under the table. They all do it. Some are more reliable and have more integrity than others. But what I see going on today is the biggest, look, equity. The stories that are going on NBC and the other stations about the poor black man, the poor Mexican, the poor, pick a nationality. They can't stand in line to get a driver's license. They can't get some form of ID so they can vote. What happens when they get a check that they have to cash and they don't have a bank account? They have to have ID. If they go to get medical, they have to have ID. Are they trying to tell us that the black people are not smart enough to figure out how to get their own identification? I listen, I had a lot of black friends. I had people worked in my company that were all nationalities. And they're trying to tell us that these folks can't stand in line and bring a bottle of water with them. Joe Biden is on TV the other day saying, this is terrible. You can't give people standing in line to vote a bottle of water. That man is an idiot. I'm sorry. He may have been okay at one time, but he's not today. He is not the caliber of leadership that this country needs. And the Democrats know that. When he said the other day that you can't give water to people standing in line in the hot sun waiting to vote, that wasn't what the law was. The law said that basically if you worked at the polling place, you could distribute some water. But you couldn't go in there with a T-shirt that says, vote for Joe Smith, and start handing out water bottles, because you can't campaign at that time. So they are, I just get speechless when I hear all the trash coming out of these guys on television. To me, the most reliable networks are Fox and Newsmax and Grit. Yeah, Grit. You probably never watch Grit, but you should. Grit is actually Old West stories about the history of Nevada and some California. And believe me, I've done a lot of research on the history of Nevada, and the stories there, they're pretty accurate. Kind of fun to watch. And it gives you some insight. But this thing about equity, when did they come up with that? The U.S. Constitution doesn't say anything about equity. There's nothing in the law that says you have to have equity. You have to have the right to do the best and be the best person that you can be. It doesn't say somebody can't stop you from being your best. That's known as freedom of speech, freedom of activity, freedom to do your own thing, freedom to associate with who you want to associate with. And I have to tell you, if equity means I have to associate with people that I don't like, or that I have to take direction from them when I don't like them, when I believe that they are just bad people in general, there's no reason I should have to have equity with them. When people don't even want to work, to have the integrity, to have the feeling of accomplishment by having work that they can do, something has got to, we have to start reverting back a little bit, because not everybody is going to have a great life. Not everybody's going to have a bad life. I have a comfortable life. I wish everyone could have a comfortable life. But believe you me, we are setting ourselves up for some big time problems. And nobody wants to tell you that, because the big giveaway is underway. By the time they're done, $5 trillion will probably get spent for infrastructure. The federal government is giving foreign aid to countries that don't need it. So they're sending their people here, and we're giving them foreign aid besides. And how about those countries? Where's the equity? They can't afford to lose the population they're losing. It hurts them to lose the population as much as it hurts us to take in so much additional population. Is there equity for abortion babies? You know, a baby can't speak for itself. If a baby in the womb could say something to the effect of, really, I can't wait to get out and become part of your society. I really want to do everything everybody else can do. They haven't got a choice in that. There's no equity there. It just sickens me to see the kowtowing to this latest group of socialists who want to just change the country. And if you remember Chuck Schumer, when he was on television and he wasn't wearing his mask and talking to a big crowd all surrounding him, and he claimed they were going to change the United States. But he didn't tell you to what. The United States has always undergone change, but always had a basic underlying set of rules under the U.S. Constitution. These days, that's all gone out the window. And while I'm on this little rant, I'm very disappointed in the Republican and Democrat parties. The Democrats, because they will stop at nothing in order to win. They will lie, cheat, and steal. They will tell you, I can remember watching Howard K. Smith on ABC in the 60s, and the president makes a speech. And Howard K. Smith comes on immediately after the speech to tell us what the president said, even though we watched it. And it turns out what he heard isn't what I heard. He actually delivered a different speech than the president made. And it goes on these days, day in and day out. I watch these guys on television, these talking heads, and quite frankly, it's obnoxious. They're not reporting the news. They're reporting their opinion. And they all get this. They must get an email that says, use these words because that's the latest we're going to do. And they do. Constantly you see on Fox the opposition all using the same exact words to describe what's going on. They don't have a mind of their own. They're being puppets. Where's their equity? So I just want to say that I'm really disgusted by what I see. I'm not just disgusted. I am personally offended that people who are in government, these lifetime career politicians, think we're too stupid to see what they're doing. Well, maybe some of us aren't as stupid as they think. We just don't have the wherewithal. I mean, they have all the media. Where's the media that you and I have? Where is there an opportunity for the average person to go on the radio and speak their piece? There's a guy on the radio out of Las Vegas who calls everybody he doesn't agree with an idiot. And that's another thing that really kind of bugs me. I had a lot of conversations with a lot of Democrats. And you know what I find about the most universal thing in Democrats that you talk to? They're smarter than us. They know more. They are better. And they should dominate the conversation so they can educate you because you're too stupid to get what they're trying to tell you. We have had shouting matches with friends because we don't understand. And don't tell me you haven't had those same conversations with people, because it happens. We would start with a conversation, which was just a little dialogue. And the next thing you know, they're shouting at me, why don't we understand? Why do you think that way? Well, because I'm as smart as you are, maybe better. Okay, so I do want to mention one thing about equity, and then I'll get off the topic. And that is, I think in all fairness, You should never be electing people to office who shouldn't be there. I'm going to give you three names one of which I think should be there, and I don't think the other two should. And I don't have an axe to grind with any of them. I just think that there's good people and smart people and people who communicate well and want to do what's right for the population. And the issue I want to talk about is who is running for office at Valley Electric. You and I, because we buy power from Valley Electric, we own the corporation. We don't own stock. We have an vested interest in the corporation. We get one vote to put people in who will work to our benefit, to give us a good company. And I was caught by an article in the Pahrump Valley Times the other day. Matter of fact, it was handed to me this morning at the breakfast. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission approved the sale of Grid Lions to Next Era Energy Transmission at the end of March. And it was a sale of $660 million, including the 164-mile, 230-kilovolt transmission system in southwestern Nevada. Gee, didn't we build one? I guess it went along in the sale. You know, when one company buys another company and they make a profit, the company that sold it, the new company has to raise rates to cover their higher costs. I can't wait to see what that's going to look like. So there were three people running for office. One of them is a man named Pete Gazzi. Pete Gazzi was part of the let's call them bad operators that ran Valley Electric for quite a while. The man never got elected with a majority vote, as was required in the bylaws. Whenever he ran, he got more votes than anybody else, but he never got a majority. Actually, the balance of votes were greater than the votes he got, which meant to me, everybody else maybe should have held office because he didn't get enough votes to beat the total. That's what majority voting is all about. You got to get 50% plus one vote minimum in order to be elected, no matter how many people run. And he was part of the crew that listened to Tom Husted. By the way, nobody has heard from Tom Husted since he left. I don't know where he's hiding out. I can't wait to find out if he ever works again. Anyway, so that was Pete Gazzi, and there was a petition to remove him from office. It was being spearheaded by Bruce Holden here in town. When Pete Gazzi knew about that, in the June he resigned before the petition could take him out. And that was stated in the June 2019 Valley Electric Rural Light magazine. Well, he's back. He wants to run again. He is running again. He thinks he should be back in. What do you have to do? File another petition? And then there's Michelle Caird. Michelle Caird was the runner-up in the last election. So she went on, I had a discussion with her, and she went to Valley Electric to find out when they're going to have a runoff so they can determine who got the majority. And the next thing you know, she's appointed, Pete Gazzi is gone, and now she's running for office. And she is part of the group of directors who seem to think that Valley Electric does not belong to you and me. I use as an example for that the trespass orders. There never was a policy on trespass, but there is now. And if you have a trespass order against you, you cannot, in a homeowners association, you go before the board of directors, plead your case. Not here at Valley Electric. Here, they appoint somebody to hear your case, and that person goes to the board to explain your case to them. I'm not making this up. If it's your co-op, you should have a right to appear directly in front of that board of directors to plead your case. And Michelle Caird is part of the latest group doing this. So Valley Electric has a third candidate running, and his name is Bill Carnes. Bill is a man of integrity as far as I know, and I have known him for, I don't know, 8-10 years out here in Peru. And he's very clearly spoken. He will tell you the facts. He won't hedge his bets. And if you ask him a question, he'll answer it. I've approached Pete Gazzi and the guy before him with questions, and you know what I got? Don't talk to me, talk to the CEO. Well, the CEO used to be a manager, and then he wanted more money, and he wanted to build an empire, so they named him a CEO. What an impressive title. That's why he was making more than $600,000 a year. Can't make this up. So anyway, I still support and endorse wholeheartedly Bill Carnes to be the next member of Valley Electric's board of directors. And I'll tell you one other thing. If you read the latest Ruralite magazine, on the back page where Mark Stallings has written his column that he writes every issue, he vacillates back and forth between how the board works together so well, but you should vote for the best candidate. I don't think he has any business even bringing that up in that manner, because in one sentence, he says you should be voting for the best director, and in the next sentence saying something about candidates. With that type of activity, I really feel that you need a Bill Carnes at Valley Electric. So with that, I've said enough. Phone number here again is 775-990-4900. Now, I'm a fan of television. I was raised with a TV set in my house, my dad's house, in 1946. Actually, probably 45, but to my memory, it was 46. And so I've always been kind of high-tech. Television in those days was high-tech stuff. And my dad owned a radio and TV shop, so that's how he got one of the first TVs in New York, in Queens. And so I'm watching these days. I'm a little disappointed with the satellite reception because it's almost all political, and all of the other shows are basically repeats, except for Gold Rush and a couple. So I turned to watch Amazon Prime and Netflix for different things that I like. And one of the shows I watched recently was Numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And believe it or not, there were 5 episodes about numbers. You wouldn't think they could do 5 hours of numbers and make it interesting. But it was. If you have not watched Numbers on Amazon, it's the only place I could find it. It wasn't on YouTube. It wasn't on Netflix. It was only on Amazon Prime. And what really gets me about the show about numbers, when I went to high school, I had college-level courses. So I didn't go to college because I'd already had a lot of the courses they were offering. I would have had to take them all over again just to get the credits. And I don't like to waste my life doing that. So this show about numbers went back to the beginning. How did they had found a bone that was 20,000 years old. And this bone had let's call them slices carved into it. And the slices turned out to be numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. So if you saw one slice and a space, and then you saw 2 slices, that would be the numbers 1 and 2. And the show really doesn't make this point, but it does come out that as civilizations and time went by, more and more people used that symbolism. They showed how the Chinese used sticks and how the abacus came to play. And it was really fascinating to watch. As a matter of fact, the Egyptians used cuneiform, and they got into how cuneiform worked. And they sort of, as each episode came along, they kind of walked you through how these changes come about. What really got my attention was when they got to cuneiform, because that's a bunch of triangles. And you have to think to yourself, how in the heck do they relate counting with sticks and stones to triangles to today's numbers? Well, I'm going to take a short break, and when I come back, we'll get into that a little more. I hope you find it interesting. So with that, Mr. Producer, I'm taking a break. Well, I'm back. So we left before the break talking about numbers. So it went from using sticks to count, just like the slices in that piece of bone I mentioned. They went to using stones and sticks. If you had one stick, that was the number one. If you had two sticks together, that was two, etc. And then they got into something else, which was kind of interesting. They got into numbers that if you had the same number, it could be written 4 different ways. And we're going to get to how that worked. But in the meantime, the abacus came along, and they talked about China and how they used an abacus. And this is when it really got interesting. I was always good at math. And they would have math contests in school when I was in school, in elementary school. And we used to have contests where you would go up to the blackboard and the teacher would give you a problem, and there would be 2 of you, and whoever solved the problem first would win. And everybody knew once I went up to the blackboard, it was all over. I was there for the rest of the class, so I never got called first. And numbers have always been something that I just looked at numbers as numbers. I never gave it much thought. But there's a psychology and a learning experience about numbers. And that's what this thing was about. So they had this thing about the abacus and how the abacus worked. And it worked just like counting sticks. And when they showed you how it worked, it wasn't just knowing how it works now, but, well, let me go on to the result. We in our country want equity. We want everybody to feel good. If there's a baseball team of little kids in Little League, everybody has to feel like they're a winner. Even if they only sat on the bench for 8 innings and played 1 inning, they were still a winner. Everybody got a trophy. For what? For showing up. Well, this was China, and we were talking abacus here. So this one scene opens up, and there's this table with 4 Chinese students, not just students, adults, sitting at a table. And I counted the number of tables, and there was over 1,000 adults to compete in a math contest. Now, math contests don't sound like a big deal, but you should have seen this one. And if you ever get a chance to go watch Numbers on Amazon, you'll find out what this was about. But the way I saw it was these 1,000 or so people had to watch a big screen TV in this huge auditorium. It looked like a giant gymnasium, but bigger. And the way the contest went was like this. They had a big screen TV at one end of the building, and they would flash a series of numbers up on the screen. There were 3-digit numbers, and they would flash, 5, 8, and the people watching had to add them up in their head and come up with the right answer. Now, when I say they flashed them up on the screen, the flash was so fast you could see the number, but it didn't last long enough for you to do anything about it. And it was amazing to me how many people that were competing could hold up a sheet of paper that they got the right answer. So it goes on through a process of elimination until there are 4 people left. That's 4 competing. And now it's really tough because the numbers are coming faster. And you have to add the numbers up and get the right answer. Well, the last man standing was interviewed as to how the heck did he beat everybody else and count all those totals so fast. And he says, I have an abacus in my head. And every time I see the number, my head adds the abacus. And it happens as fast as they can run the numbers. Imagine that out of over 1,000 people. This guy was able to do that. His brain adjusted to the way the abacus worked. Now, we don't use the abacus anymore. And actually, everybody now uses Arabic numerals. But you know, one of the things I got out of this whole series of shows was that at one time there was no such number as 0. When they first talked about the sticks and the stones and the carvings and all, there was never the number 0. It was numbers 1 through 9. The absence of a number is an imaginary number, but it's still a number. So they went into how this came about, which is another interesting part of the story about how people think. And I've watched some other shows about people who did numbers like Fibonacci and guys like this. And it's amazing to think that we even got to the point we're at today. They even went through algebraic equations. And when I first took algebra, I was told in the beginning of the class the teacher was going to show us how to figure out the answer when you don't know what the answer should be. That's algebra. Ugh. That's X. The letter X represented the unknown quantity. And they did that in this video. Now, my disappointment in the video, in the show, was when they ran through the numbers, they ran through the process so fast, I had to keep going back and sequentially see what they were doing. Now, I had algebra, I had trigonometry, I had geometry, I had all those subjects while I was in high school. But it's been a long time, so I was trying to play a catch-up. And it was interesting that they ran through the explanation so fast that I had to go back 8 or 10 times and step by step watch the process again. Then I had it. Then I realized what I had learned years ago. And that is that if you don't know the number, you can figure it out even though you don't know the number. And when you look at what's going on in science today, it's just absolutely amazing how they can calculate things. There was an example about how did in the old day, we're talking old civilizations here, how did they calculate how far from the earth the sun was? Did you ever wonder about that? I wondered. I wondered, how the hell did they figure that out? They went through that in the show. And it's so simple when you see how it was done, and yet so complicated that you had to figure it out. Anyway, I'm not going to get into any more of that show. It just really kind of made me feel good about all of the things I'm learning about math again. And I'm looking forward to watching some more of those shows. I want to talk a little bit about my cell phone. 5G is coming. Right now we have 4G. And 4G is faster than 3G. But 5G now is super fast compared to the others. And I got to notice, I use consumer cellular for my cell phones. I do because they operate on AT&T's and T-Mobile's antennas anyway. They're just a different company leasing time and to commit to a certain amount of usage. Anyway, I got a notice from them that I was going to have to get a new phone, not just one phone. Every one of my phones, all three of them, plus my house phone, I had to get new equipment because of 5G. Now, I'm not sure that's truly the case with every carrier. I'm not even sure if that's true of consumer cellular right now. But it was a notice, and I was told when 5G was first discussed that you wouldn't need to get a new phone, you just wouldn't be able to run at the 5G speed, you'd have to run at the 4G speeds. And maybe that's basically the case. If you want 5G, you got to get a new phone. But they said that my son's phone was good for 3G, and eventually they were going to discontinue servicing that speed, which is understandable. Well, I haven't had a chance yet. This just happened yesterday. I brought it up at breakfast, and one or two other people have also gotten the same notice. So I'm going to try and find out, do you really have to get another phone, or will you just be able to use it at the regular 4G speeds? And then I looked at how they were marketing the phones. You could go online and you could buy a phone for $10 a month for 15 months. A phone that might cost you $400 or $500. Whoa, I thought that's a hell of a deal. They're really pushing the limit here. And then I went back and I reread it again, and it said, first you have to pay $250, and after that you can pay $10 a month for 15 months. And then there was another one called the Wish, and they were offering the phone for $79. Oh, but that phone was out of stock. So you could buy a little more expensive phone for $91. They never said that it's $91 a month till it's paid off. It just said $91. Well, I haven't bought another phone, to be honest about that. And I may never buy another phone. And I may wind up changing carriers because of it. But right now, my money rides on consumer cellular because for $20 a month, it's good service. I checked around. I asked some other people, and I was told that it was good service. And I converted 3 phones, and my house phone is also with them. So where I was paying AT&T $150 a month, I now pay $80 a month, and I have tons of service out of it. So we'll be kind of keeping on top of that as time goes on to figure out where we are. Also wanted to mention Publishers Clearinghouse. I have in my hot little hands here the winter update for residents of Pahrump. You know, Publishers Clearinghouse keeps sending you stuff about, God, these are great marketing people. One more thing to do. Call us because you need to be on the final list of potential winners, and on and on and on. So I got a letter saying they were looking for 3 or 4 people out of about 30 that they couldn't locate as winners. And I'm thinking, you know, you see this thing on TV, who's going to get $5,000 a week for the rest of their lives? Oh, wow, that's a lot of money. I was really curious how that worked. So here it is. I have the winter update for residents of Peru. And it says, if you think our winners never come from your area, think again. We've awarded over $500 million to our winners including many winners who live quite close to you. And here are just a few. Well, boy, they really made a jump of extreme proportions because they say the winners never come from your area. And then they say, think again, we awarded over $500 million. Not from your area, total, forever. And so there was a woman named Melinda Mangan. She's listed as living in Pahrump as a winner. And I went to see her. Honestly, I didn't think there was truly a real. I used to tell my wife, "Oh, come on, this is baloney. Nobody ever wins. They never give you the names of anybody who won." And here it was, Melinda Mangan, a winner in Pahrump. Well, I looked for her in the phone book. I looked for her everywhere on the voter list. And I found her in the property list with the assessor. And I went to pay her a visit. And yeah, she did win. She won twice. The first time she won $10. And the second time, she won the grand total of $500. Enough, I think, to pay for the stamps and the crap she had to buy to stay there. Well, now there's a second winner. All the other winners came from Las Vegas, either Henderson, North Las Vegas, and one actually in Carson City. But now there's a man named Donald Dixon, and he lives here in Pahrump, and I have his address. I want to go visit Donald and just see how big a winner he really was. Because certainly he didn't let the newspapers know. He wasn't on television, but he's the second winner in Pahrump. I'm not going to give out his address over the air, but I can tell you that he does live here in Pahrump, and after I go visit with him, I'll see if I can talk him into coming on the radio and give us a little of his experience with Publishers Clearinghouse and being a winner. So we have about 14 minutes left, and we're coming into the season now where everybody should be looking in their garden. You know, trees are starting to bud. Weeds are coming. We're in the weed season. Weeds are coming up all over the place. If you get them now, it won't be a big deal. But if you let them go, you'll be sorry. Because it's a big job getting those weeds out when they get big. And they grow overnight. You go to sleep one night and your land is clear of weeds. You wake up in the morning, they're already 8 inches tall. And where you didn't think you could ever have weeds, these guys are really good. They grow naturally in the desert. They are native to the soil. They don't need a lot of water. Well, if that's the case, why don't we just grow those plants? Some of them are edible. There's a plant called the Moringa Tree. Now, I like things that are perennials. A perennial is a plant that comes back every year. As long as you take care of it, it comes back. And I've preached for years now growing asparagus, because asparagus is a perennial. It comes back every year. As long as you take care of it, you know, give it a little fertilizer, have good soil for it, it'll come back and feed you 5 weeks of every year. You'll cut asparagus every 2 or 3 days. That's how you can stand there and watch the damn stuff grow. Now, it doesn't grow in everybody's yard because you have to prepare the soil. But I do like perennials. Trees are perennials. An apple tree, a pear tree, peach, plum. I mean, these bring you food every single year. Strawberries are like that. Matter of fact, strawberries send out runners that root, and you can actually have your own strawberry farm. Well, it'll take a while, but you could do it. So this moringa tree, this is the first year I've really heard about it, and I'm so impressed that I ordered 1,000 seeds. And if you think you would like to have a few moringa seeds, here's the story. It has a reputation of being the most nutritious plant on the planet. More vitamins and minerals and antioxidants than you would normally get in any other plant. And it grows faster. It grows like asparagus. Well, not quite as good. But in a good year, the potential for that tree could be to grow 18 feet in a year.
Is that a fruit, vegetable, or what?
Yes. It's a seed. It's kind of like a string bean, but a real long one.
Okay, so it's a vegetable then.
Okay, I'll go along with that. I do like that term. So anyway, if you plant the seed, and you can go on YouTube. If you go on YouTube and you type in moringa tree, there's several videos about how you harvest it. And this plant is known throughout the world, and it's a desert plant. It doesn't like extreme cold, but it's pretty hardy when it comes to living in the desert. So one of the seeds themselves normally will generate within 3 to 5 days. And I've watched some of the videos on how quickly they grow. So you can harvest the leaves, you can harvest the seeds, and there are actually some videos on how to prepare it. So you could add it as a spread on like salt and pepper and the other things you put on your food for the nutritional value. And you can eat in India a lot of times. They try to keep that tree at a lower level rather than let it get too big, so that it puts out more leaves and shoots at the level that humans would be harvesting. And then when it comes time to the end of the season and they're harvesting the leaves, they trim it back, and boom, next year it's right back again doing the same thing. It's a perennial. So anyway, if anybody would like to have some of these moringa seeds, I have them real cheap. I want to recoup my investment in 1,000 seeds, but if you send me an email to andy@andyalberti.com. It's really tough to remember since this is the Andy Alberti show. If you send it to the andy@andyalberti.com and give me a way to contact you, I will see that you can get some seeds. I'd love to see a whole bunch of these trees sprouting up here in Pahrump, Nevada. I gave some seeds away to people that come to my breakfast. It's actually, I call it my breakfast, but it's really everybody's breakfast. So I gave some seeds away there because I want to see more trees like this in the desert. It's an exciting thing to think that you can grow your own food. You know, you go to the supermarket and you go to the meat counter. Well, my wife will send me in, she wants me to get some pork chops, a pork loin, some sausage, a couple of steaks maybe. And I look at it as I'm going to the cadaver market, because what we're looking at is dead animal. Somebody had to slaughter that animal. So I don't want to waste the beautiful taste of the foods that we get at the meat counter. I'm very respectful of the fact that that animal was sacrificed so I could enjoy a delicious meal. I like hamburger, sausage, all those good things, turkey. I mean, all the meats are delicious. But an animal had to give up its life in order for me to enjoy some of those foods. Now, there are some vegetables that can substitute for the absence of meat in your diet, so you get the protein. But I have to respect the animals that they didn't know they're giving up their lives so we could eat. But that's the way it works. And how do you imagine how many animals there are? There's 330 million people in our country alone. Most people are eating meat in addition to other stuff. The enormity of the food processing that has to go on in today's world, if we can all take some of the strain off the farmers by growing food at our homes, just look at the savings. You don't have to ship it. You ship seeds. Everything else is grown. You can grow it in your backyard. You can grow it in pots on the patio. And you don't have to grow everything, but you should. As a matter of fact, if you live in the desert, here's a little tip. If you want to grow tomatoes in the desert, here's the problem. In the desert, when the soil temperatures get above 90 degrees, so you start seeing 90-degree weather, tomato plants stop producing. And that tomato plant will sit there and grow during the summer, but the tomatoes will be green all summer. Unless you plant, well, there's a couple of ways, but if you plant what's called a heat wave tomato, they're good to 110 degrees. They will continue to produce. Don't you wish you could have fresh tomatoes off the vine? When I was doing the garden class, I do a whole hour just on tomatoes. I tell you things you won't hear anyplace else, but they're true. And tomatoes, a tomato and mayonnaise sandwich with a little bacon strips on it, good. We can't wait till the tomatoes come in and we sit down and we have our first sandwich of tomatoes. Good. And what's the best mayonnaise to have with a tomato sandwich? Best Foods. You know, Best Foods wasn't always Best Foods. Originally, Best Foods mayonnaise out of New York, I believe Brooklyn, was known as Hellman's mayonnaise. Hellman's. And when I went in the military and I was down in Florida, they had Best Foods mayonnaise, and I tasted it. And I'll be damned, it tasted just like Hellman's. Well, it turned out it was. They were just labeling it under Best Foods. So that's the best mayonnaise to have when you have tomatoes. And little salt, you have to have a little salt on there. And don't give me this business about sea salt and all these other, just good old salt, iodine in it. Stop having goiter. You know, people do get goiter if they don't have enough iodine in their system. Iodine prevents it. So if you're going to have plants, why not look for plants that come back every year? Like I said, asparagus is one of them. People don't realize, but a tomato plant is technically a perennial. It dies off in the wintertime because it gets too cold and it won't recover in the spring. But if you know how to treat it, that tomato plant can come back in the spring, the same one that you finished harvesting from the year before. I'm not going to tell you how to do that. If I ever do the garden classes again, when the gods in government tell us we can finally sit next to each other again, I'll do another class on the tomatoes. And, tomatoes are a big crop. When my son first joined me, we had so many tomatoes. Tomatoes love the sun. We made our own tomato sauce for 2 years out of that. Anyway, coming to the end of the show, and again, I'm going to give you email in case you're interested in these moringa seeds. It's andy@andyalberti.com. With that, it's been fun being on the radio again. I hope you've enjoyed some of the things we've talked about. And with that, as your host, I am now out of here.